There are those out there who would have you believe that this killer of Snoke was always set to revert back to his heroic Solo ways, and that his first kiss went down during episodes 7 to 9. But what if they were wrong? It's time to discover the truth about the eventual Supreme Leader and debunk those supposed facts many believe about Kylo Ren. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 things everyone gets wrong about Kylo Ren. Number 10, he isn't technically a Sith Lord. Just because a figure in this galaxy far, far away boasts an unmistakable bright red-bladed lightsaber, doesn't necessarily make said character a Sith Lord automatically, folks. Look at the likes of Asajj Ventress and the various Inquisitors who have popped up in the Star Wars universe, with all those dark side and red lightsaber wielders still not technically being classed as Sith Lords. Kylo Ren is another name you can add to that list. Despite swinging a terrifying red cross-guard lightsaber, one containing a cracked kyber crystal, and being taught the ways of the dark side by Snoke, Ren never actually developed into an official Sith Lord. The former Ben Solo didn't ever take on the Sith Lord title of Darth at any point in his life, though it seemed he was still intent on following in his grandfather's footsteps for a time, and eventually becoming the latest powerful figure to officially join the villainous group. That obviously never came to pass, however, with Ren instead seeing the light before he gained that Sith Lord badge, and just going down in history as yet another dark side user who never earned that all-important Sith promotion. Who's your favourite non-Sith Lord Darksider? Was it Kylo Ren, Asajj Ventress, or someone else? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 9, he's older than you think. Judging from the way the terrific Adam Driver petulantly spits his dummy out and explodes across the screen during much of his time in the Star Wars sequels, it's unsurprising that many viewers assumed Kylo Ren was likely only supposed to be in his late teens or early 20s in The Force Awakens. The fact Daisy Ridley's increasingly powerful Rey was also just 19 years old during that Episode 7 debut also suggested her young dark side counterpart was likely of a similar age. But it turns out that Ren is actually a whopping 10 years older than the other half of the Force dyad, with the grandson of Darth Vader being born in 5 ABY. He was also just a year younger than the fresh-faced 30-year-old Driver during his The Force Awakens arrival. So while Driver's brilliantly immature and youthful performance may have fooled you into assuming he was just entering into his 20s, the truth is that Ren had actually hit the big 3-0 just before his sudden death on Exegol in 35 ABY. Number 8, he wasn't always supposed to become Ben Solo again. Even after watching Kylo Ren shockingly murder his own father in The Force Awakens, many still felt that the plan was always for this son of Han Solo and Leia Organa to eventually step back into the light as Ben Solo. That's precisely what happened during the events of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, of course, with Ben finally returning to help Rey defeat the Emperor late on. However, as recently confirmed by Adam Driver himself on The Rich Eisen Show, that actually surprisingly wasn't always on the cards for Ren. In fact, back when the actor first signed on to appear in the series as the masked Vader admirer, the original plan he discussed with J.J. Abrams was for Kylo to experience the opposite journey of Vader, having the young Force user go from being the most confused and vulnerable, and by the end of the 3 movies he would be the most committed to the dark side. Put simply, the Ben Solo comeback was quote-unquote never a part of it when Driver first signed up. That part of the story, along with the focus on the dyad, only got introduced when Abrams returned to direct Episode 9 as Colin Trevorrow's replacement. Number 7, he didn't actually burn down Luke's Jedi Temple on purpose. It's revealed by Luke Skywalker during Episode 8, The Last Jedi, that, in the wake of Ben Solo lashing out at his lightsaber-wielding master during his moment of weakness, his student ultimately destroyed his precious Jedi Temple. He'd also murdered many of his fellow Jedi trainees, and wandered off with a handful of Luke's other students. However, far from just being a case of Solo intentionally razing the place he'd been taught within out of frustration and anger, the Rise of Kylo Ren #1 comic, released in 2019, suggests that this tragic event was actually an accident. Solo is shown screaming out, why did you do it?" before a Force lightning storm, possibly created from his own rage, suddenly rips apart the Jedi Temple and sends Solo flying. But when he sees the damage, Solo responds by attempting to get inside the burning temple, potentially to save whoever remained within, only to once again get launched back by another explosion. He'd even follow that up by noting I didn't want this, before a dark voice in his head told him, and you did not choose it, Ben. The Jedi did, Skywalker. Whether you want to interpret this as Snoke / Sidious being the ones behind the lightning storm, or the event being unintentionally caused by a devastated Solo. Either way, it doesn't appear the eventual Kylo Ren destroyed this temple on purpose at all. It was just an angry accident. Number 6, Kylo Ren had kissed other people before Rey, maybe. Perhaps one of the most controversial smooches in movie history. You can be forgiven for wondering whether Ben Solo's kiss with Rey in The Rise of Skywalker was actually the former's first ever. Hell, Adam Driver himself had even questioned whether his character had ever locked lips with another human during the making of The Last Jedi. But when the actor nudged his director on the matter, Rian Johnson actually responded by noting how he believes maybe he has. As Johnson would explain in the LA Times when asked whether Episode 8 was the first time Ren had held hands with a girl, the director jokingly imagined a possible scenario where the students within the Jedi Temple enjoyed a game of spin the bottle, or spin the lightsaber as he put it. Sure, this may have been little more than a throwaway joke from the mind behind The Last Jedi, but it's not entirely impossible to imagine a curious Solo exploring a little in his youth. He's only human after all. Thanks for checking out this video today. Hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture Star Wars on your screen. Number 5, that isn't just any old dust he drops his helmet onto. In an attempt to live up to his infamous grandfather's name, Kylo Ren had his own rather intimidating mask made. Then, when the First Order menace is done scaring the life out of his enemies with that Vader 2.0 helmet, he opts to dump it onto what most assumed was just a table full of dust, as seen during The Force Awakens. Because not dusting your quarters is just what dark and broody figures do, right? But as J.J. Abrams would actually reveal to Entertainment Weekly around the time of Episode 7's Blu-ray release, the backstory behind that visual is more disturbing than you likely realized. So the grey stuff found on that dusty table, those are actually the ashes of Kylo Ren's many enemies he slaughtered during his time fighting the bad fight. That particular shot of the helmet coming down on the table was also originally meant to be used in the scene involving Ren chatting to Vader's own mask. After instead deciding to keep Ren's helmet on for said Vader moment though, Abrams felt the helmet slam was still too good to lose, and found a way to squeeze it into a scene where he interacted with Rey. Number 4, he only found out the Vader truth late. Speaking of Kylo Ren's obsession with the half-man, half-machine Anakin Skywalker eventually became, it's never really noted in the sequel trilogy exactly when Ben Solo discovered the truth about who his grandfather really was. Most probably assumed Solo would have been informed about such a massive part of the Skywalker story at some point before he began his training with his uncle, right? Well, apparently not. As explained in the 2016 Bloodline novel by Claudia Gray, Leia Organa had actually chosen to keep the fact that Darth Vader was her father a secret, with not even young Ben being made aware of this fact. However, when one of Leia's political rivals eventually reveals exactly who her father was to the galaxy, Ben ultimately discovers the shocking fact. As noted in the Skywalker A Family at War biography by Kristen Baver, Ben Solo discovered his own relation to Darth Vader, not via his family but by HoloNet news. The revelation felt like betrayal. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't too long after this that a Ben in his mid-20s ultimately turned his back on the light side, with Solo's maybe accidental destroying of the temple happening that same year in 28 ABY, 6 years before the events of The Force Awakens. So now you know. Number 3, Leia, Han, and Luke weren't the only ones who raised him. It's widely known that Ben's parents, Han Solo and Leia Organa, along with his eventual master/uncle Luke Skywalker, all helped raise the young Solo. But during the eventual Kylo Ren's early years, Han and Leia were also actually assisted by a few droids in their home, as revealed in the Last Shot novel by Daniel Jose Older, along with a protocol droid T2LC that would typically take care of young Ben when the two parents were away. A Class 3 culinary septic droid called BX778 was also there to cook all kinds of wonderful food for the family. However, on one rather unsettling occasion, BX found himself in charge of looking after young Ben, and it was here when he was suddenly infected by a virus that resulted in him thinking about cutting Solo's throat, in response to Ben throwing a tantrum. Thankfully, Han was able to take out the transmitter that was causing the virus before Ben was murdered, with the youngster seemingly not having a clue how close he was to death via infected droid. That's not even the creepiest thing about his younger years either. Number 2, Snoke started manipulating him from way earlier than you think. While it's evident from the sequel trilogy that Snoke was the one who had been pulling Ben Solo towards the dark side, what isn't quite as clear in the flicks is exactly when that Palpatine puppet had begun his creepy seduction of the future Kylo Ren. From the information offered up in episodes 7 to 9, many understandably assume Snoke only began focusing on Ben once he began training as a Jedi, but The Force Awakens novelization actually offered a far more disturbing truth. As Leia explains to Han in that book, Snoke actually had his eye on the youngster from the very beginning, with Organa telling Ben's father he knew our child would be strong with the Force, that he was born with equal potential for good or evil. From the shadows in the beginning, even before I realized what was happening, he was manipulating everything, pulling our son toward the dark side. Whether this means Snoke was subtly manipulating Ben from as far back as the time he was in the womb, or simply began luring him towards the darkness after sensing he was strong in the Force not long after his birth. Either way, it's clear Snoke/Palpatine began his grand plan to corrupt the Solo child from a scarily young age. Number 1, he isn't the only person to use a crossguard lightsaber. Few will forget the utterly captivating visual of Kylo Ren igniting his explosive red lightsaber for the very first time during the teaser trailer for The Force Awakens. This crackling, unstable crossguard variation of the traditional Jedi Sith weapon was like nothing the average Star Wars lover had ever seen. It was also ridiculously cool. However, while those same folks were quick to assume Ren was the only person in this galaxy far, far away to ever wield such an awesome blade, mostly due to the fact they'd never seen it in this universe before, that's not actually true at all. Though Ren's fiery version of the crossguard lightsaber was the first to appear in canon, the weapon has shown up in a number of other places in the galaxy ever since. The Star Wars Rebels animated series sees Ezra Bridger pick up a green crossguard laser sword as our heroes take in the petrified bodies from the Great Scourge of Malachor that went down thousands of years earlier. Said battle involved a number of Jedi who practiced the Makashi combat style fighting against the Sith, with those Force users often opting for a crossguard lightsaber. Elsewhere, Jedi Knight Cal Kestis also upgraded his own lightsaber in the Jedi Survivor video game post-Order 66 so that he could swing around a crossguard weapon too. Put simply, he may be the most famous user of the epic laser blade, but Kylo Ren is actually just the latest crossguard legend.